Hi, I'm Daniel Fisher here at Sweetwater, and on today's Synth Clips, we're talking about Aftertouch, both poly and mono. So first let's start with some definitions. Aftertouch is when you press a key and you press harder after the note starts and you hit the floor of the key bed. Now, as you press, you're pressing against a surface that's measuring how much pressure it's getting. And in the case of channel aftertouch or mono aftertouch, there's just a single strip, and no matter how many keys you're pressing down on, whichever key you're pressing down the hardest on is the one that it reads. Because it's just a single strip, it simply reads the strongest pressure. And it's useful for a lot of things. It's really good for when you need to globally change something about a sound you're playing, but you don't have a way to play foot expression pedals, or you don't have a hand free to do mod wheel. It's just a great way to use all 10 fingers on notes, but still have an expressive thing. One thing though is it only goes positive, whereas you could make some other things go both positive or negative depending on how you set them up. It only goes positive, so you kind of have to think about that when you assign it. And then there's the other kind, and that's poly aftertouch. And it was popular in the mid to late 80s, and then it just sort of dried up and faded away, and nobody had it anymore. And partially I think it's because it is certainly trickier to do. It is a new skill to be playing 10 notes and worrying about the velocities of all 10 notes, and then worrying about individual pressure. However, once you get a good polyphonic aftertouch keybed, and you start using it and you assign it in a way that musically works for you, you'll miss it as soon as it's gone. So that's why I have the ASM Hydrasynth, because it does have both channel aftertouch and poly aftertouch. And you can use them both simultaneously, send them to different things in different amounts and different depths, which is very, very cool. So we're going to start with channel aftertouch, also known as mono aftertouch. And I'm just going to go to my mod matrix, and what I have here is mono aftertouch assigned to all oscillators pitch, but right now I have a depth of 0. So I hit the key, and by the way, I'm on an init, so it's just one sawtooth oscillator, very plain, and nothing happens. Now, as I turn the pitch depth up from mono aftertouch going to pitch, you'll hear that I can raise the pitch. And you can kind of do a vibrato with it. Problem is it's only positive modulation, so the pitch is either always only going up, or if I turn it upside down, I can only go down. And that sounds really weird. Up is kind of okay because guitars only do it like that. And you can go crazy with it. If I go 128. But normally you don't do it on pitch. Normally you would do it on something like filter cutoff. So I'll just go here and change it. Instead of all oscillators, I'm going to go to filter 1. And then on filter 1, I'll make that a 24 dB ladder filter. And I'll turn the resonance up so you can hear it. I'm going to sweep it real quick. So what I'm going to do, and this is what I was saying, you have to consider that this is a positive only controller. That means that if I'm going to filter, I need to set the filter to the lowest that I'd ever want it. Call it that. And then I'm going to press as hard as I can and turn this knob up until it's the most I'd ever want it. And what you're really listening for is a point where after you keep turning, nothing else happens. I call that pinning, like on a tape deck where the needle's pinned, you know, because you've gone as far as you can go. So you never want to do it so that you have this dead space where nothing's happening. So really carefully listen to that. It helps if you turn the resonance up, which I'll do. Okay, so now I know that I have a full sweep from what I like for a min to what I like for a max. And it's crucial for Aftertouch to work that you spend the time to get the min right and the max right. And also you have to consider what else is going on. If you've got envelopes going to your filter, or you've also got LFOs going to your filter, or velocity going to your filter, all of a sudden you now have other things that are fighting that may push it out of range, so all of a sudden Aftertouch doesn't seem to work at high velocities because you're already as open as you can hear. So you really have to try all of those different things and keep trying it in context of how you're going to play that sound to get it exactly right. Now that's mono Aftertouch, and to demonstrate that, I'm going to hold these notes, but I'm going to push pressure up here, but you're going to hear the filter's going to open on this as well. Okay, now I'm going to switch to Poly Aftertouch. And notice that only the note that I'm pressing opens up. Okay, really, really expressive and a lot of fun once you get used to it. But again, it is one more thing to think about when you're already thinking about a lot of things. So don't try that for the first time at a gig, right? Or at a recording session. Get used to it, live with it, try and do it. And the other thing that will really help you is try to be subtle with it. Don't always make Aftertouch mwah, right? So too much. So I'm going to ease up. Now it's a smoother thing. Now, the thing that makes the Aftertouch in the Hydrasynth particularly desirable is not only does it have channel Aftertouch and Poly Aftertouch, but in their system setup, you can go and set some parameters, and there's a bunch of them for the Aftertouch. So one of them is the curve, okay? So for example, if I set this to soft, very soft, right? It's like I'm just barely touching. Problem is when you're playing, it's hard to not get that to trigger. Okay, so I'm not a fan of very soft, and then we go to soft, and now it takes a little more, and then natural. This is the normal curve. Notice now it's not even triggering yet until I really. And I can go farther than that. There's one called sigmoid. I'll have to look it up what that means, but this is what it sounds like. And then hard. Now I got to really lean into it. So I'm going to leave it at natural for now. That seemed pretty nice. So the next thing is, and we really learned this after people started using their keyboards to record on a DAW, when DAWs first came out, or when you started recording to a built-in sequencer that had a limited number of notes, 10,000 notes, or 10,000 events. And it turns out that very few people could play keys that had Aftertouch and not constantly send Aftertouch. We just don't think about pressure. We just lean into it and enjoy leaning on the keyboard. But you're sending a tremendous amount. If you have a MIDI monitor app, you can just see constant scrolling of Aftertouch information. So it's one of the reasons a lot of the onboard sequencers have a default to not recording Aftertouch because it's just so expensive. You're recording way more Aftertouch than you're recording note data. So one of the clever things on this, aside from just the curve, is an Aftertouch delay. And it goes from 0 milliseconds to, I think it's 400 milliseconds. And that is, it's not even going to trigger until you've done that Aftertouch for that number of milliseconds. So just hitting a key hard doesn't accidentally do it. I have to hit a key hard, and then right now, 224 milliseconds later, I can lean into it. Okay, but now there's a little glitch where all of a sudden it's kicking in and the filter's kind of slamming open. That's why there's a fade parameter. So now I can say, all right, I need you to take 100 milliseconds to open up slowly. Now, I'm hitting hard. No pressure is getting out. And then the next one, and this is the one that I've always not liked about Aftertouch, and that is if you're playing a chord and you're doing something with filter, soon as you let go, that filter slams shut. That's really noticeable if, for example, your release time is long. All right, so you're playing a chord and you do this nice swell. but then it closes quickly. So what they put in there in the system page is a release time. And now I'm going to say, I want you to take 200 milliseconds to close even after I let go. So it's going to have a nice curve to it. And I can go even longer than that. I'm going to go the full 400 milliseconds. Hear how much smoother that is? It's just much more pleasant. And then the last one is an offset. So in other words, they're just moving the values one way or the other to kind of help you, again, not accidentally trigger the Aftertouch when you don't want to do it. So I'm going to turn that up some. And it goes from 1 to 4, and I'll just set it to 2. Now, I have beautiful Aftertouch. It releases beautifully. I'm never accidentally doing it. And if you hear it with something that doesn't have these controls, there's always this going on while you're trying to play, and that's no fun. Okay, so now we're going to do something different. This time we'll take LFO1 and we'll use it to modulate the pitch of the oscillators. And then we're going to take channel Aftertouch or mono Aftertouch, and we're going to use that to do the depth of that LFO going to the pitch. Kind of like the way vibrato is usually done on a mod wheel, we're going to do it with Aftertouch. And I'll start with mono Aftertouch. And so here we go to the modulation matrix. I assign it. I'm going to use LFO1, so I touch that. Then I come down one, and I go to the oscillators. I can do oscillator 1, 2, or 3, and if I scroll one more, it goes to all. And it's already on pitch for me. And so now I shouldn't hear anything until I turn the knob, because there's no depth to it yet. And let's get that speed a little better. And we'll set it to a triangle. Okay, now I can go and maybe that's the depth that I want. But I don't want it all the time. So I'm going to go to 0, and I'm going to do another mod matrix. And this time I'm going to assign mono Aftertouch. And then I'm going to go ahead and assign it to the mod matrix number 1. So I hit mod matrix, it puts it in there, and now it's going to do the depth of number 1. So in other words, whatever comes in on this is going to, by this value, increase the depth of this one. So if I have it very low like I currently do, nothing happens. But now as I turn it up, I'm going to push hard and then turn up to max. Now I know that I have a nice vibrato and I can't overdo it. But now I also want to increase the rate of the LFO as I'm increasing the depth of the LFO. So I just one more time assign mono Aftertouch. Except this time I'm going to go to LFO1, and it already populated rate for me. And at 0, there should be no rate change, only a depth change. But now to change the rate, what I'm going to do is press as hard as I can and then increase that to the maximum rate that I want. So hopefully it'll now go between the min and the max that I want. Now listen how as I go from a shallow vibrato that's moving slower to a deeper vibrato that's moving faster. Maybe I'll go even faster. Very musical. Now I'll do the same thing, except this time I'm going to switch from mono Aftertouch to poly Aftertouch, and you'll see how much more complex it can get to where you now have individual control of the vibrato of each of 4 voices. So each of the notes are individually getting deeper and speeding up with the vibrato. That's a lot to think about while you're playing. But there are some other ways you can use it as well. You can do it for volume. So mono aftertouch to amplitude or volume and filter cutoff. So it's going to get louder and brighter, right? So I go in here, I'm going to assign mono aftertouch. And then I'm going to assign it to volume. So I hit the amp. And then I come down here and I change that to level. And I'm going to do a positive on that. So it should boost now. Okay, back it down just a little bit. And I'm going to make it a little darker now. And now I'm going to assign mono aftertouch to the filter. And it's already set to cutoff. And I'm going to press down hard, and I'm going to get it the brightest that I want it. Now, because we're using mono aftertouch, anything I do to any of these keys is going to do it to all the notes, right? But if I go to poly aftertouch, I'll be able to bring out individual notes, and I'm going to lower the amplitude even more so that it really pulls the note out. So you're going to barely hear the notes, and now it should really push them out. So now here's a case where I probably did way too much delay and offset in my system. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then I'm going to go back to the system and I'm going to adjust that a little bit. It was good for demonstration, but it's probably way too much. I'm going to keep the release on though. That's the one parameter I really like. I'm going to get that offset back to 0. Let's get that delay really short. Okay, I can live with that. So now I go back to this. And if I kind of roll my hands around, I can roll the notes around. And another trick that I've learned is that if you assign both poly and mono to the same things, it actually kind of blends better, because when you're making one note louder, everybody else gets a little bit louder, but then the single poly note gets even louder than that. So it's kind of a global swell within one solo note sticking out. So let's do that. So I have my poly aftertouch going to amp level, and my poly aftertouch going to filter cutoff. Then I'm just start a new page, and I'm going to have mono aftertouch going to amp level just a little bit. There. And then I'm going to do the same thing, mono aftertouch to filter. Filter 1 and cut off. So now when any individual note comes out, everybody else comes up a little. So you can hear I have individual control over each note, but then I also have control over the whole sound as well. And it's a very organic feel when you do that. And I'm definitely going to be incorporating that into more of my patches. Okay, so now I'm going to play some of the factory presets that make use of poly and mono aftertouch. This one uses poly aftertouch to open up the filter. So now here's an example where you can have an arpeggiator going and then have Aftertouch doing things to the sound. Again, lets you have all your fingers free to be changing your arpeggiation notes while you're doing some expressive things. So now here's another example where we're using oscillators set to an interval, I think it's fifth, and then we're using Polyphonic Aftertouch to bring out individual notes. Here's a lot of parameters moving. Here's a great example of using Aftertouch to scan through a list of waves. Here's Aftertouch changing some vocal qualities. Really is beautiful having individual control over notes or clusters of notes. So hopefully this will give you the confidence to go in and start adding Aftertouch, both poly and channel, to your own patches. If you have any further questions about the ASM Hydrasynth, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. If you have any ideas for future synth clips, just write them in the YouTube comments below and we'll add them to the list. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for watching.